Proverbs 20, verse 19. He goes about as a talebearer, reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with his lips. How many of you last week remembered with the words that Jesus gave to Paul? Be of good cheer. I had to use that and remember that all throughout the week. Be of good cheer. How can anyone be of good cheer when it's all great? Of course we can be of good cheer. There's nothing to be worried about, nothing to be sad about, nothing to have any complaints about whatsoever. But a Christian can be of good cheer when everything is rotten, just as easy as we can at any given time. Knowing that God is mighty and wonderful no matter what happens in our lives. Be of good cheer is the only word in the ancient Greek, tharseo, and it is used that 5 times in that New Testament, and each time it's said by Jesus. And each and every time he used it, it was because somebody was depressed, they were angry, they were sad, they were hurting, they were feeling not up to themselves. And at those 5 times, Jesus literally said, be of good cheer. Whether they were of good cheer or not, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they were, because each and every time he used it, it lifted somebody's spirits up. And you know what's even better is when you think of being of good cheer. Remember I said Jesus is with us no matter where we're at. To be of good cheer is because not everything is always fine. There are times that we don't even know the half of what's taken place. But Jesus does. Jesus fully understands. And we have to understand that no matter what, to be of good cheer still falls in line and gives us the capabilities to look at the promise that God has given in Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. God is always on his throne. He's always in place. And we can look to that and we know that hope. He has never lied. He's never changed his mind. And his word is true. Paul had to stand up before the Sanhedrin Council last week, and we know that he was smacked immediately. Because the high priest at the time was not too thrilled with the statement that he made. I am of good conscience. And they got all radical when Paul told them, hey, I'm being persecuted because of believing in a resurrection. And that separated and caused a dispute between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they became radical, and the Roman guard was so worried that he took him back into the barracks. And he did not question him. He did not say, what the heck were you thinking? You wanted to speak to him and then you caused this. Well, Paul, he felt like he kind of failed. But he also had his nephew come and tell him about a plot by 40 Jews that were not going to eat or drink until they killed him. And he told them, go tell the captain of the guard, which he did. And they put together an escort for Paul, 470 Roman troops, and they escorted him to Caesarea, where they sent a letter to the governor. And when he arrived, they presented Paul and the letter, and Felix tells him, okay, I will hear your case, but I have to wait for your accusers to arrive. How many of us in our lifetimes have had people come up and literally lie about us, to do us as much harm as possible, to make people change their minds about who we are? Well, this is what's going to happen to Paul this week. And we're going to see just how we should encounter this in a Christ-like manner. So let's pick up now with Acts 24:1. After 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders, and with an attorney named Tertullus. and they brought charges to the governor against Paul. The Jewish leadership, Ananias, the high priest, and the elders, they brought this man named Tertullus, a skilled lawyer, to present their case. Now, attorney or rhetor means a speaker, an orator, of a forensic orator or advocate. Think about that for just a second. Have you ever in your life heard of a lawyer representing a client in the Bible until now?
No.
No. This is the first time that this takes place. Tertullus was more than what we would review as an attorney. He was a forensic lawyer. In other words, he was able to take words and break them down and twist them and make them sound to a point where he could sway people to his way of thinking. He was hired by the high priest and some of these elders because, well, he's Roman by trade or by birth, and so he has a way to be able to talk to all these Romans in Latin. And so that's what they brought him for. Now, do not assume that these elders that came with the high priest were all the elders from the council. No. These, remember, because the council itself is divided by Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, why would he bring any Pharisees with him? All Paul would have to do is say something about the resurrection, and then they'd all be looking stupid in front of Felix. So I've got really a good idea that he did not bring any Pharisees. He brought Sadducees. And why? And I bet there was probably only 2 of the elders that came with him, because that was what was required in the Old Testament to convict a suspect. There were no attorneys. It was 2 witnesses that would give and present their case before the council. Instead, the accusing witness stated the offense in the presence of the accused and the accusers. The court would question each of them, especially the accused. Ananias would not have brought anyone other than people that were on his side, who agreed with him. So don't think that any Pharisees were present. Deuteronomy 16 verses 18 and 19. You shall appoint for yourselves judges and officers in all your towns, which the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes. And they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not distort justice, you shall not be partial, and you shall not take a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. The presence of all 3, Ananias, the elders, and that skilled lawyer, at the court of Felix reminds us of how serious the Jewish leadership were about obtaining that conviction against Paul. And it also shows how biased they really were. The first time in history they brought a lawyer. Acts 24 verses 2 through 4. After Paul had summoned Tertullus, began to accuse him, saying to the governor, since we have through you attained much peace, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, we acknowledge this very way and everywhere most excellent feelings, with all thankfulness. But that I may not weary you any further, I beg you to grant us by your kindness a brief hearing. Antonius Felix, we need to know who he is. He began life as a slave. His brother Paulus was a friend of the Emperor Claudius. Through such influence, he rose in status. First as a child gaining freedom, and then through intrigue, he became the first former slave to become a governor in the Roman province. Now Tacitus, the Roman historian, described Felix as a master of cruelty and lust who exercised the powers of a king with the spirit of a slave. So he's not a very nice guy. And yet here we are, listening to this lawyer do what lawyers are so good and famous for, giving the lawyer speak, to do and do it in such a sleazy manner as to try and smooth talk and get this guy's pride up. Oh man, he's just talking great things about me. And he's trying to sway everybody else to his way. Now, flattery is an often neglected sin, one that the Bible speaks about more than anyone might think. Romans 16:8. For such men are slaves, not of our Lord Christ, but of their own appetites, and by their smooth and flattering speech, they deceive the hearts of the unsuspecting. And it also tells us in Jude 1:16, these are grumblers, finding fault, following after their own lust. They speak arrogantly, flattering people for the sake of gaining an advantage. 4 different times, the books of Proverbs connects flattery with the sin of sexual immorality. But it also deals a lot with when you flatter people, it never comes of any good. Felix was not a dummy either. He's sitting there listening to this guy trying schmoozing with all this wonderful flattery. And Felix knows just what kind of a governor he is. And he knows, yeah, what kind of smoke are you blowing up my? He knows that he's trying to sway him to get the outcome that they want. Acts 24, verses 5 and 6. For we have found this man a real pest, and a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, and then we arrested him. We wanted to judge him according to our own law. Now wait just a minute. You're not a Jew. You're a Roman lawyer. So you want to judge him according to our own law. Well, gosh, I think that's why Paul's there. And this may not necessarily have been what he was trying to say. He's representing these guys. And so he's probably trying to pass on them. We want to judge him under Jewish law. The charges against Paul were essentially that he was political. And he's dangerous. And that he had desecrated the temple. Ancient Judea was filled with would-be messiahs and revolutionaries against Rome. Remember, that's why that commander said, are you that guy that ran away that we were looking for? When Paul told him no. Tertullus wanted to put Paul in the same group with these kinds of terrorists. John 1:46b. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? See, he's part of this sect of Nazarenes. And everybody knows that there's nothing good there. Nothing out of Nazareth is good. Some things never change. Everyone thought things that came out of Nazareth were up to no good. Nazareth had this poor reputation as a city. The reference to Paul being a ringleader, though, of the sect of Nazarenes was intended to, as a despising reference to both Jesus and his followers. Well, Jesus was of Nazareth. Therefore, this guy who's associated, oh, they're just horrible people. Psalm 31:13. For I have heard the slander of many, terror is on every side. While they took counsel together against me, they schemed to take away my life. Isn't this what Tertullus is trying to do? Felix, this guy is so horrible. He belongs to this sect of people, and he's bringing in dissent against Rome. He's trying to get everybody fired up. But what happened when he made that statement? That he has disrupted and got all the Jews around the world fired up and going against Rome. He just showed unintentionally how powerful God was. Here is this Paul character, and his power and extent of his knowledge is so great that it's actually influenced everything all throughout the Roman Empire. Now, there was really only one specific charge against Paul and all the stuff that he listed. Now, wasn't there? He desecrated the temple. And for this, there was no evidence either. This was literally a fabricated charge and a rumor by the Jews, by the Asian Jews that came in Acts 21:28 and 29. Men of Israel, come to our aid. This is the man who preaches to all men everywhere against our people and the law and this place. And besides, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Now, Paul was pretty good at defending this originally. He never stepped foot in the temple whatsoever. And remember what happened. They tried to kill him then too. Paul had nothing to fear from the truth. But he knew that the truth does not always win out in a court of law. Is that still true today?
Oh, yes.
Big time. Significantly, the same man who found it so easy to flatter also found it easy to accuse with no evidence. Proverbs 29, verses 5 and 6. A man who flatters his neighbor is spreading a net for his steps. By transgression, an evil man is ensnared, but the righteous sings and rejoices. The two almost always go together. The person who flatters today will likely tomorrow accuse without the evidence. John 18:31. So Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews said to him, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." It has not changed whatsoever since the time before Jesus. If they would have put him to death under their own law, then that would have been bad. That would have caused a major stir in Rome. The Jews really wanted to judge and kill Paul just like in Jesus' day. However, they did not have that authority to actually put someone to death. So here they are. They tried to go to the Sanhedrin, and now they're before Felix, a Roman governor. Acts 24, verses 7 and 9. But Lysias, the commander, came along and with much violence took him out of our hands, ordering his accusers to come before you. By examining him yourself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were so. Here the man is still trying to get Felix to understand. This is such a dangerous man. And the Jews started getting riled up. Yeah. If you listen to what we're telling you, this guy is so bad, you got to kill him. You got to kill him. He's horrible. The Roman commander Lysias, he's the one that rescued Paul to begin with. He's the one that sent 470 armed guys to escort him here. And when he went back to Jerusalem, he left a ton of guards there. He did not want to have anything happen to Paul whatsoever. Clearly, Paul's accusers regretted that case had come this far, and they would have preferred to settle it with the mob justice. Tertullus did not even pretend to offer any outside evidence of the charges. He just claimed what they told him. He never investigated. At least nowadays you have what the police that are part of the district attorney's office now, they will go on and investigate all this stuff. His only hope was that Paul would incriminate himself under examination by Felix. Proverbs 24:28. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. That's okay. We're going to let Paul speak, and he's going to bring his own head to the chopping block. The other Jewish accusers present, the high priest and the elders, they agreed with all these charges, and they started becoming vocal because they really did not want to have Paul speak. They didn't want the truth to come out. But they also did not offer any supporting evidence for this. Last week it was stated that Paul may not have known that this was the high priest because, well, his actions were not what a person who was a high priest would do. Was not a violent person, was not any of this other stuff. Remember, the person appointed and anointed to the position was supposed to be a person that followed God's laws and setting the examples for all to follow. The people followed his example in deceit and lies. Acts 24:10 through 13. When the governor had nodded for him to speak, Paul responded, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense, since you can take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. Neither in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city itself did they find me carrying on a discussion with anyone or causing a riot. Nor can they prove to you the charges which they now accuse me. Paul was happy to answer for himself. He had nothing to fear, knowing that the facts of the case were in his favor, and notably, Paul used no flattery whatsoever to address Felix. He didn't even try and put him on equal status with Felix. Proverbs 14:25. A truthful witness rescues lives, but the one who breathes lies brings deception. Even though it had been no more than 12 days and many witnesses could have been brought, they didn't bring a single person. They gave no witnesses to prove that he was in fact guilty, or that in fact that he brought a Greek or a Gentile into the temple, or they didn't bring anybody to say he incited riots. There was simply no proof for their accusations. Acts 24, verses 14 through 21. But this I admit to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law, and that is written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men cherish themselves, that there shall certainly be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. In view of this, I also do my best to maintain always a blameless conscience, both before God and before men. Now after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings, in which they found me occupied in the temple, having been purified without any crowd or uproar. But there were some Jews from Asia, who ought to have been present before you and to make the accusation, if they should have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves tell you what misdeed they found when I stood before the council, other than for this one statement which I shouted out while standing among them, for the resurrection of the dead, I am on trial before you today. Paul made it clear that he had not abandoned the God of his fathers, or the law, or the prophets. Instead, he acted faithfully in fulfillment of them both, just like these Jews did. And just like Abraham in the hope and faith in God's promise. Romans 4:17 and 18, as it is written, a father of many nations have I made you, in the presence of him whom he believed, even God, who gives life to the dead and calls into being which does not exist. I hope against hope he believed, so that he might become a father of many nations, according to that which had been spoken. So shall your descendants be. Notice, Tertullus called Christianity the sect of the Nazarenes. Paul called it the way, which is what everybody actually knew it by. Everyone knew they had heard of the way. Paul again states that he believes in the resurrection of the dead. Now, this was believed by many or most devout Jews of Paul's day, though not by the Sadducees. Paul's belief that there would be a resurrection was connected to his specific trust in the resurrection of Jesus. Did you hear anything about the Sadducees here going nuts? Oh, kill him, he's talking this nonsense. Oh. No, they kept quiet. They didn't say a word. They did not disrupt Paul's defense. And we know Paul believed this because what is the gospel that he preaches? I bet you're getting almost sick and tired of hearing this. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. Now I make known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, in which also you stand, by which you also are saved. If you hold fast to the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Jesus Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. Paul clearly believed in a resurrection, for both the righteous and the unrighteous. The idea of soul sleep or annihilation for the unrighteous is not accurate according to his New Testament teaching. In his defense, Paul stated all he was doing was bringing the offerings and support that he had collected through all of his travels all throughout the Roman Empire. Paul reminded Felix that there was no eyewitnesses to their testimony to prove their point and charges of his accusers, because Paul was in the right. He consistently called the case back to the evidence, which is what we should do if people are trying to disparage, lie about, or drag our lives through the mud. Keep bringing things back to the evidence, what they present, the lies that they tell, the lack of witnesses. Isaiah 54:17, no weapon that is formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. You see, when we are actually following and living up to the truth, those people that try and disparage, try and run your reputation into the ground, tell all the lies to turn people against you, the Lord is going to take care of them. You can still be of good cheer. You can still remember that God is standing next to you with every breath you take. Yahweh is with me. He's right here. He's in my brain. I can be of good cheer. Lie all you want. You will not succeed. Now, Felix is looking at this, and in Acts 24, 22, and 23, kind of fools a few people, but he doesn't vocalize it. But Felix, having a more exact knowledge about the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion for him to be kept in custody, and yet have some freedom, and not to prevent any of his friends from ministering to him. You see, Felix, he knows about this way. He's heard about Jesus Christ. He's heard what Paul has been preaching. He understands it. And he avoided a decision under the pretense of waiting for more evidence through the Roman commander. He had enough evidence to release Paul right now. But he doesn't. He knew all about the way more than anybody ever understood, even the high priest. Felix tried to walk a middle ground. Now, isn't this what we call trying to straddle that fence? He's trying to straddle that fence. He knew Paul was innocent, yet he did not want to identify him with Paul's gospel and the Christians. So he made no decision and kept Paul under guard. But he gave him more freedom, don't you know? Now his friends and stuff can come and they can minister to him. He has people that he can talk to. Acts 24, verses 24 and 25. But some days later, Felix arrived with Drusilla, his wife, who was a Jewess, and sent for Paul, and he heard him speak about the faith in Christ Jesus. But as he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix became frightened and said, "Go away for the present, and when I find time, I will summon you." Felix wanted his wife to hear Paul's testimony, either as a curiosity or so that she could advise him. Now see, this is what a lot of people don't understand. In those days, women were nothing, right? But every governor, every king, and everyone else, they relied on what the wife wanted to know. What do you think, hon? What should I do? Look at Pilate. His wife tried to tell him, have nothing to do with this guy, wash your hands. And so he didn't take her advice. Well, he kind of took her advice and washed his hands. He's expecting his wife Drusilla to advise him. How do I get out of this stinking mess, dear? After all, they claim to have insufficient evidence for the decision. Now, who is Drusilla? Drusilla was a sister of Herod Agrippa II, and Bernice mentioned in the next chapter. Drusilla was beautiful, ambitious, and about 20 years old at this point in time. Felix seduced her away from her husband and made her his third wife. Think about what Paul was talking about when Felix stopped him. She's listening to this as well. Felix stopped him when he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. These are 3 points when you think about it. These are 3 points that many modern day preachers would avoid speaking about, especially in speaking to some high figure like Felix, and possibly for a good reason. If we say, for example, let's use the Biden administration. Preacher goes up and starts talking to the Biden about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. What do you think would happen to that pastor? Well, they would probably be thrown in prison. They would probably disappear for a very long time, never to be seen again, or they would have their lives ruined. I like to use that computer repairman who had Hunter Biden's computer. Election's coming up. He says, oh my gosh, I've got this computer, tries to call him. No return phone call. Tries to get a hold of him again. Says, that's not my computer. He knows it's his computer. So he goes to the FBI. FBI goes, yeah, okay, whatever. When he sees that they're not doing anything with it, he sends a copy to Giuliani. Now what happens? Oh my gosh. This guy's trying to put his thumb on the scale. We must destroy his life. Is his life destroyed right now? Yeah. Even though he has truth and justice on his side, they have dragged him through the mud.
Yep.
They have threatened his life. They have closed his business. But you know what? The best part about it is, the truth on his side, he's now suing the daylights out of him. And he will probably have enough money to retire for the rest of his life, for his kids to retire right along with him, and everything.
Yep.
Think about those people that, ooh, no, the January 6th riot. What happened to them?
Still in jail.
They're in jail. When was the last time you heard anything about those poor people in jail without being charged, without being in trial, without having a possibility of bail?
Yesterday.
You heard about them yesterday.
Yeah. Well, one of them, the judge said that he was innocent and just dropped the charges and let him go.
Oh, good.
Okay, see, good. See, I hadn't even heard that one.
Yeah, that was the first I've heard in months.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, he should get a lot of money too.
Yeah, you should.
How did Paul develop these 3 points? I don't know. However, I can make an educated guess on why he addressed them. 1 Corinthians 15:34. Become sober-minded as you ought, and stop sinning, for some have no knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. The righteousness that is ours in Jesus Christ comes from him and not any human ruler. He wanted Felix to understand this basic principle, along with, since he did understand that he had no excuse for the sin, because you know about the way. You understand, you have heard about Jesus Christ, you have heard about God, you understand what God wants, and yet here you are. You're still sinning, and you know all this. It's not like the other people who've never heard. Their lifestyle, him and Drusilla, were probably a little bit out of control, so he may have wanted to talk about the need for the Christian ethics or self-control. Romans 6, verses 12 and 13. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, so that you obey its lust, and do not go on presenting the members of your body to sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. If they did accept Christ and change their ways, they would in the end come before God for judgment if they don't change their lifestyle. 2 Corinthians 5:10. For we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Hearing this message, Felix became afraid. Wait a minute, stop. Go away. I'll call you when I have the time. It's like Paul knows something about his life. At least we can say that he probably understood it. The gospel should make those who are intent on rejecting Jesus afraid. And he was afraid. Felix was unwilling to still declare him innocent. Stop. I'll call you when I'm ready for you, Paul. And you know, it'll be interesting to hear what his wife told him when all was said and done. You don't see that recorded anywhere. Instead, he rejected Jesus under pretense of delaying his decision again. He procrastinates. Men respond to the gospel in this way. They express their rejection through delay. But by delaying their decision to commit to Jesus Christ, but it's rejection nonetheless. It's like playing Russian roulette. The longer you don't accept him when you know the truth, the more it's going to end up probably ending up bad in the end. 2 Corinthians 6:2. At the acceptable time I listened to you, and on the day of salvation I helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. The longer somebody puts off this acceptance, the longer they have to live in sin. They're not saved yet. The Bible tells us to come to Jesus in repentance and faith daily. Come today. The claims of Jesus are never convenient for us now, are they? Oh, well, you know, if I accepted Jesus right now, well, I might be convicted enough that, well, I'd better quit doing some of the things that I do. And you know, I'm kind of enjoying those still. I'll accept Jesus when I get older. Okay. If we insist on waiting on it for a convenient time, we will wait for an eternity spent agonizing separation from God. It's so important to get people to understand that. Acts 24, verses 26 and 27. At the same time, too, he was hoping that money would be given him by Paul. Therefore, he also used to send for him quite often and converse with him. But after 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And wishing to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. Under Roman law, the type of custody Paul was in could only last for 2 years. Felix showed that he was willing to break Roman laws by keeping Paul for more than 2 years. Felix refused to release Paul, though he knew he was innocent. Sorry about that. Missed it. Let me go back. Felix met with Paul a lot during those 2 years. Met with him all the time. But what did he want from him? It wasn't to have this conversation. He wanted money. I want that bribe. Isaiah 56:11. And the dogs are greedy; they are not satisfied. And they are shepherds who have no understanding. They have all turned to their own way, each one his unjust gain to the last one. I want money. You know, Paul, if you just give me some money, I'll let you go. And he tried for 2 years talking with him to try and get him to do just that. Paul wasn't giving him anything. Paul was just busy living his life, and he was doing what he needed to do to preach the gospel to anyone that came to see him. Even though he was innocent, he refused to release him. John 12:42 and 43. Nevertheless, many even of the rulers believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing him, for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the approval of men rather than the approval of God. He did this for the same reason Pilate did when he condemned Jesus. He knew he was innocent. They both acted out of pure political advantage, wanting to do the Jews a favor. If I just do what you want, I can keep the peace. In a way, the people like Felix and Pilate are the guiltiest of those who reject Jesus Christ. They're the most guilty. They know what is right, but refuse to do what is right purely out of fear of man. They have an eternally fatal lack of courage. Take this idea with you when you leave today. When we live in truth, nothing can overcome it. Nothing can overcome us. Anyone who wants to take you down through deceit and lies, they're not going to prevail. Light always, always overcomes the darkness. There may be enough of them to really push you down, to feel a little discouraged, but be of good cheer. Isaiah 59, verses 14 through 16. Our courts oppose the righteous, and justice is nowhere to be found. Truth stumbles in the streets and honestly has been outlawed. Yes, truth is gone, and anyone who renounces evil is attacked. The Lord looked and was displeased to find that there was no justice. He was amazed to see that no one intervened to help the oppressed. So he himself stepped in to save them with his strong arm, and his justice sustained them. He's with us all the time. He will intervene. It may not be in the time we would like to see, but it will always be in his timing. Just like the poor fellow that had the computer. He's lived a living hell for 2 years. But God is stepping in and intervening, and justice will prevail. Let's go to prayer.